Jesus faced exhaustion and doubt. What if the doubt you feel today is not proof that your faith is disappearing, but a sign that you have been carrying too much for too long? There is an exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, because the body may stop while the mind continues fighting invisible battles. You pray, you wait, you try to trust God, yet eventually one frightening question appears. How much longer can I keep doing this? The Aramaic world surrounding Jesus gives us three ancient words that open a deeper way of understanding exhaustion: release and hope, etnokna, shpak, and sip. They are not magical formulas, but together they reveal a powerful spiritual movement. Recognize what has exhausted you. Release what you cannot control, and recover hope before circumstances change. And the third word becomes especially important when you have already prayed, already waited, and nothing seems different. Because what do you do when you surrender the burden? But the answer still does not come. There is a moment when exhaustion begins disguising itself as doubt. At first, you are simply tired. You have been facing the same problem for weeks, months, perhaps even years. You prayed about it, tried to make wise decisions, encouraged yourself to remain faithful, and continued doing what needed to be done. But when nothing seems to change, the questions become different. Instead of asking, "When will this end?" you begin wondering, "Does God still hear me?" Without realizing it, exhaustion has crossed from your daily life into your spiritual life. This matters because many people judge themselves for questions that appear when they are depleted. They assume strong faith should always feel confident, peaceful, and certain. Yet the gospel accounts never give us such a shallow picture of spiritual life. Jesus knew pressure, rejection, grief, and opposition. In Gethsemane, Matthew describes him speaking openly about the overwhelming sorrow of his soul. He did not need to deny anguish in order to remain faithful to the Father. That distinction changes how we understand our own difficult moments. The Aramaic linguistic world surrounding Jesus helps us explore this more carefully. Not through a secret code or supernatural formula, but through three ideas that form a remarkable progression. First comes recognition, admitting that something has become heavy. Then comes release, understanding what must no longer dominate your inner life. Finally comes hope, remaining turned toward God when you still cannot see what tomorrow will bring. That is why the three words we are exploring should not simply be repeated. Their deeper value appears when we understand the movement connecting them at A-T-N-A, A-K-N-A-A, S-A-S-A-B-A, S-A-A-R. Recognize, release, hope. And before this video ends, I will guide you through a quiet prayer built around these three movements, so you can experience them rather than merely understand them. But we cannot begin by releasing the burden. First, we must confront something many faithful people find surprisingly difficult to admit. I am tired. The first word takes us directly to the beginning of this journey, connected with the Semitic linguistic world of weariness and exhaustion. We should not turn it into something the historical evidence cannot support. There is no reason to claim that Jesus repeated this word as a secret technique whenever he felt tired. Its importance is deeper than that. The language of his world could name human weariness directly, reminding us that acknowledging limitation and trusting God are not opposites. Think about how often we do exactly the opposite. Someone asks how you are, and you immediately answer, "I'm fine." You continue working, helping, solving problems, and carrying responsibilities because stopping feels like weakness. Sometimes even prayer becomes another responsibility you believe you must perform perfectly. Yet, underneath everything, a quieter voice is saying, "I cannot keep carrying all of this at the same pace." The first movement, therefore, is not overcoming. It is recognizing. This helps us understand why the human moments recorded around Jesus matter so much. The Gospels show him withdrawing from crowds and seeking solitary places, and Gethsemane shows anguish being acknowledged before surrender takes place. There is an important order here. Recognition comes before release. You cannot honestly place something into God's hands while pretending it never became heavy. So allow etnokna to become a reminder of honesty. What has exhausted you? Is it uncertainty about tomorrow? A financial concern you cannot solve tonight? responsibility for someone you love, a prayer that seems unanswered. Or perhaps the constant effort of appearing strong when inside you desperately need rest. Naming exhaustion does not magically remove it, but it can end another exhausting battle, pretending it is not there. And once you can finally admit this has become heavy, the next question emerges naturally. Do I have to keep carrying it? That takes us to the second Aramaic word, shbaq, where recognition begins turning into release. If you want to go deeper, our Aramaic Wisdom Collection and the New Lord's Prayer Manual are now being launched together. You'll see the collection and QR code on screen with all the details. It's a simple way to continue exploring these ancient words and the original prayer of Jesus beyond today's video. Once you recognize that you are exhausted, a more difficult question appears. What exactly is making you so tired? Sometimes it is not the problem itself, but the endless attempt to control what the problem might become. You replay conversations that have already ended, prepare answers for situations that have not happened, calculate outcomes you cannot predict, and carry tomorrow's possibilities as though they were already today's responsibilities. The body may be sitting still while the mind continues lifting invisible weight. This is where the teaching of Jesus about tomorrow becomes remarkably relevant. In Matthew 6, he tells his listeners not to be consumed by anxiety about tomorrow, because tomorrow will bring concerns of its own. This was not an invitation to become careless or passive. Jesus was confronting the exhausting illusion that worrying today gives us control over tomorrow. There are responsibilities we must carry, but there are outcomes we were never given the power to control. And this is where doubt often grows. You prayed, but then continued mentally carrying the answer. You surrendered your family, but spent the night imagining everything that could go wrong. You placed a financial problem before God, then replayed it 100 times in your mind. Eventually you become exhausted and interpret that exhaustion as spiritual failure. Yet perhaps the problem is not that you have stopped trusting. Perhaps you have never stopped carrying. That distinction prepares us for the second word. Ednokna allowed us to recognize, this has exhausted me. But recognition alone cannot remove the weight. Something must happen between acknowledging the burden and finding the strength to hope again. And this is precisely where the Aramaic world gives us a much richer image. The next word appears within a family of meanings associated with leaving, releasing, allowing something to go, and forgiveness. It brings us close to language connected with the prayer Jesus taught his disciples. The word is shbaq, and its challenge is simple but uncomfortable. What if peace does not begin when your problem disappears, but when you finally stop demanding that your mind carry an outcome it cannot control? Shbaq. The second word is shbaq, from an Aramaic root with a remarkably broad field of meaning. To leave, let go, release, permit, and in important contexts, forgive. This is why the word becomes so meaningful when we enter the linguistic world behind the Lord's Prayer. Forgiveness is not merely an abstract religious idea. The underlying imagery can carry the sense of releasing what is owed, loosening the claim, and no longer holding something in the same way. Now bring that image into exhaustion. Some burdens cannot be solved by thinking about them for another hour. Some conversations cannot be rewritten. Some people cannot be controlled. Some answers cannot be forced to arrive sooner. And some wounds remain heavy precisely because we keep picking them up internally long after the moment itself has passed. Shbaq introduces a different movement, not denying what happened, but loosening your grip upon what you cannot change. This is why release should never be confused with giving up. Giving up says nothing matters anymore. Release says, this matters deeply, but I refuse to make myself responsible for what belongs beyond my control. That distinction is essential. Jesus did not teach indifference toward tomorrow. He taught freedom from being consumed by it. He did not teach that wounds were imaginary. He placed forgiveness at the center of prayer. Again and again, the movement is away from compulsive possession and toward trust. So think of the burden you identified in the previous chapter. You have already recognized it. Now imagine opening the hand that has been gripping it. Shbaq, release. Let go. Not because the situation suddenly became unimportant, but because carrying it every minute has not given you the power to control its outcome. Yet something unexpected happens after release. When you stop gripping the future, there can be an empty space where worry used to live. And that space raises perhaps the hardest question of all. If I release what I cannot control, what do I hold on to instead? That is why our third word may be the most important for anyone exhausted by waiting. Recognition tells the truth. Release opens the hand. But Sabar will show us what keeps the heart facing forward when the answer has still not arrived. And if these ancient Aramaic meanings are helping you see the teachings of Jesus differently, our Aramaic Wisdom Collection and the New Lord's Prayer Manual are available now. You'll see the collection and QR code on your screen. Take a look after the video and continue this journey with us. The third Aramaic word, sib. After recognition and release comes the most difficult part of all, waiting without allowing uncertainty to rebuild the burden you just released. This is where Sabar enters our journey. Within the Aramaic and Syriac linguistic tradition, the root is associated with hope, expectation, and looking toward what has not yet been received. This is important because biblical hope is deeper than simply telling yourself that everything will turn out exactly as you want. Hope can remain even when you do not yet know how the story will end. Consider the moment after prayer. Nothing outside you may have changed. The diagnosis has not disappeared. The financial answer has not arrived. The person you love has not called. The door you hoped would open remains closed. This is precisely where doubt tries to return, whispering, "If God heard you, why is nothing happening?" But Sabar points toward another posture. You do not need visible evidence in this moment in order to keep your heart facing toward hope. Now the three movements finally belong together. Etnokna reminds you to recognize, honestly, I am tired. Shbaq invites you to release, I cannot control this. And Sabar turns you toward hope. I do not see the answer yet, but I will not allow uncertainty to decide what I believe. Recognize, release, hope. The sequence matters because hope becomes difficult when we are still pretending we are not exhausted, and release becomes difficult when we refuse to name what we are carrying. In a moment, we will stop explaining these words and enter the experience promised at the beginning. If you can, become still for a moment. Relax your hands rather than holding them tightly. Allow your breathing to become comfortable and You do not need to create a special feeling, and you do not need to make anything happen. Simply bring before God the one burden that has exhausted you most. The next chapter contains no teaching and no interruption. It is only prayer, and as we move through it, remember these three movements. Etnokna, recognize. Sh, beaku. Release. S-A-B-A-R, hope. The three-word prayer for exhaustion and doubt. Father, I come before you, tired, carrying questions I cannot answer, and burdens I was never meant to control. Etnokna, I recognize my exhaustion, and I no longer need to hide it from you. You know every silent struggle, every unanswered prayer, and every moment when doubt entered because I was simply too tired to keep fighting. Shbaq. Today I release what I cannot control. I release tomorrow the answers I cannot force, the people I cannot change, and the outcomes I cannot predict. Give me wisdom for what belongs in my hands, and peace to surrender what does not. Sabar, even before I see the answer, Echo. When doubt returns, remind me that waiting does not mean I have been forgotten, and uncertainty does not mean you are absent. I do not need to understand tomorrow tonight. Give me strength for this day, peace for this moment, and faith for the next step. Etna Kianahi, recognize Shbaqi, release Sabariho. I place my exhaustion, my doubts, and everything I cannot carry any longer into your hands. Amen. When this prayer ends, the circumstances waiting for you may look exactly the same. The message you hope to receive may still not arrive. The financial problem may still require a solution. Someone you love may still be struggling. And tomorrow morning, your mind may attempt to pick up every burden you just placed down. This is why these three words matter beyond this moment. They are not an escape from reality. They can become reminders of how to meet reality without allowing every uncertainty to become a weight you carry alone. When exhaustion returns, remember Etnokna. Instead of immediately telling yourself, I need to be stronger. Stop and recognize what is happening. Perhaps you are not losing faith. Perhaps you are tired. Perhaps you have been carrying something silently for far too long. Naming that condition can interrupt the cycle in which exhaustion becomes fear, and fear eventually becomes doubt. Then remember Shpak. Ask yourself one simple question. Is this mine to act upon? Or am I trying to control an outcome that is not mine to control? If there is something you can responsibly do, do it. Make Tikal have the conversation. Take the next necessary step. But if your mind is simply rehearsing tomorrow's uncertainty again and again, open your hands. Release the outcome without abandoning your responsibility. And when nothing appears to change immediately, remember Sabar, hope is easiest when evidence is already visible. The deeper challenge is maintaining hope in the space between prayer and answer. That is where doubt often speaks loudest, but it is also where trust becomes meaningful. You do not need to know how everything will unfold before taking today's next faithful step. So when tomorrow feels heavy again, return to the sequence. Recognize, release, hope at the Enaka, Enaha, Es, Habeaku, Sabar. 3 ancient words, but one simple movement away from exhaustion, controlling your inner life. If this exploration has awakened your curiosity about the original language behind the teachings of Jesus, our Aramaic Wisdom Collection and the New Lord's Prayer Manual are now available together. You can see the collection and QR code on your screen with the details. Continue the journey whenever you are ready. And before you leave, write I recognize, I release, I hope in the comments. Not as a formula, but as a reminder of what you are choosing today. If you know someone who has been carrying too much for too long, share this message with them. Subscribe if you want to continue discovering the ancient linguistic world surrounding the teachings of Jesus, and remember this the next time doubt whispers that you cannot continue. Being tired does not mean your faith is gone. Sometimes, the next faithful step is simply recognizing the weight, releasing what was never yours to control, and choosing hope one more time.